Pie five.
High five.
High five.
Pie five. Welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton. That is my wife, Elsa Walton. This is my mother-in-law, Pat Boyd, also known as
Mommers.
Mommers. What Mommers is awesome at, among many other things, is making pie. We don't call her a pie master, we call her a pie mistress. And I am lucky enough to have married into a family of pie mistresses.
I thought I was the pie queen.
Oh.
Pie queen?
Get the title right, Chip.
Oh my gosh, pie mistress, pie queen.
This is the princess.
This is the pie princess. What you're about to see in this episode of Chop and Brew is I had to pay them off to get this secret recipe so we could finally publish it. We're going to show you how these two make pie from scratch. It is an amazing thing. The process is awesome, and then the product is always amazing.
Delicious.
Totally delicious. So you're going to see us make a couple of different pies. You're going to see us enjoy the pie. If you've ever wanted to know how to make a pie from scratch, ditch that store-bought crust. Make your own filling. Make your own crust. It's about to happen.
Pie five.
Pie fives. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew.
Brew for brew. Pie for pie. Okay, so when it comes to making your own pie from scratch, is it a difficult process or is it pretty easy?
It's real simple. It doesn't have very many ingredients at all. If you're talking about the crust, now the filling can get real complex.
Right.
But the crust is really just basically 2 ingredients. They're shortening and flour. And it's 2 per 1. 2 cups of flour to 1 cup of shortening, which now comes in sticks or a cup, so that's easy. Just one of those makes a 2 crust pie.
One of your first secrets to the crust is the ratio of wheat flour to whole flour, right? That's where all this begins, the magic starts.
I tried to make it a whole wheat pie crust and I found that doesn't work. Because if you put all whole wheat flour in, you get plate tectonics in a pie pan. And so I tried 50-50. White flour, and I don't ever use the unbleached. I use white flour, and 50% wheat flour, and that didn't work. The particles were they're not sticking together and not making, something uniform enough that you can roll out into a pan. Finally, what I ended up with was 1/6 of the flour is wheat, whole wheat, and the rest is white, and that separates those granular particles enough that it will hold together. You start with 1/3 of a cup measure, and you just use 1 of those whole wheat and 5 of those white, and that's going to blend in with your shortening. And I use a fork. I use 1 of those and just press it together until it's mealy. You put a little bit of salt in there, not a lot, like 1/2 teaspoon would be too much. 1/4 teaspoon is probably about right. And then that's going to be refrigerated for a while. It can be half an hour at least, or overnight is the way I like to do it.
When you're working that shortening into the flour, what's the texture you're looking for? You explained it kind of as mealy.
Yeah.
What is not far enough and what is too far?
Well, my mother said pea-sized grains was good. I like it a little finer than that. You want it just a little lumpier than cornmeal, but really blended together pretty well. And that'll roll out and be a uniform sheet. And
what's the flavor kind of reaction from the blend, do you think?
It's a little crispier than
it gets a little crack when you bite into it. Nice. That the plain white doesn't.
Speaking of crack.
You gonna have
a bite?
So
let's try it.
When it comes to making that flour mixture, You can do it day of, but we did it the night before, which kind of makes the process break up in a nice way.
Yeah.
But either way, you have to refrigerate that flour mixture,
No,
right?
you don't have to.
Oh.
It's easier to work with if it's cold.
Okay.
You really don't have to. Some people don't.
Okay.
But they end up with something that's a little more sticky.
So the second part, before you actually get into the true pie making mode, is you make this mixture, the Pat Boyd sugar mixture.
Oh yeah, the sugar is like about half white sugar and half brown sugar. And what I do is, in my measuring cup, I just kind of loosely spoon in brown sugar until it's up to where you want it. And then I pour white sugar in on top of that. Brown sugar first, white sugar on top of that until it goes to the bottom. And if it won't, just work it with a knife or a fork until it does. And that's my blend for sugar. Put the spices into that. And then I'm going to cut up little pieces of butter and put them in there too. A lot of recipes say dot the top of your pie with butter. I like to have it uniformly spread out throughout the sugar, so that when I layer that into the pie, I'm putting it in every layer. I don't use a lot of butter, but I just blend it into the sugar.
When it comes to spices, what do you like most often, most common, and what's in this?
In this apple pie, of course, it's got to have some cinnamon. Quite a bit of it, actually. That's the bulk of what you're going to put in. And I really like nutmeg. I put quite a bit of that too, maybe half as much as cinnamon. Some cloves, not very much. A little bit goes a long way there. Ginger, allspice. That's about it. You can put in other things, but that's kind of what I like to put in.
So we should also point out, when you were giving out the numbers for the crust ratio and measurement, that is for a 2 crust pie. Mm-hmm. A single right. 2 crust pie.
Or it'll make just 1 crust pies.
2 1 crust pies. But in this case, we doubled down because these ladies made double crust, 2 double crust pies.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the sugar mixture and the flour mixture. We did them the night before. Apparently you can do it right beforehand. Let's talk about day of pie baking. How did we... I can't even remember. It's like it was so long ago. It was only like 4 hours ago. No. But you basically get your refrigerated flour mixture back out of the fridge. Was that the first thing we did today?
Mm-hmm. No. First thing, you're going to fill up a cup with ice. Pour water into it and let that just really get cold. And that's going to be the water that you blend in with the flour and everything to make this into a dough. That's first. And set that out. Get out all your stuff you need, your rolling pin, spatula for turning, getting the underneath the pie crust so you can lift it up on. I like to put it on the rolling pin, roll it up on that, roll it back into the pan.
So get everything ready.
Yeah.
Get all your weapons ready for war.
all the stuff you need, yeah. And your good pie rolling out table. You need a good one. Mm-hmm. It's just got to have a smooth surface on it. You're going to be spreading flour out all over that. So you're going to need some flour all over your rolling pin, all over your surface, and then start blending water a little bit at a time, nice cold ice water, into the flour and shortening mixture, and until you can make it form a ball that will hold together.
Not too far though. How far is too far?
You don't want it to feel sticky.
Okay.
You don't want it to feel gooey. You just want it to hold together.
If you go too far in this step, is there anything you can do? Can you add flour to?
No.
So you want to be careful with the addition of the ice water.
Just stop and go with what you got. Flour your surface. You don't add more of anything. No.
Elsa, what's the secret to rolling, since we broke into teams and you are our roller? What's the secret to a good even? You did it magnificently once again today.
You gotta roll it out in a bunch of different directions to keep it even. You don't want any thin spots in the dough. So I just kind of roll it for one direction for a couple strokes and then go another direction, back and forth.
Because you want it round.
Yeah, you want it round too. You don't want.
Or you want the size of the pie pan within the overall kind of irregular
because
shape.
you're going to be putting it down the sides too.
Right.
Yeah. So you gotta roll it out a little bigger than your pie pan. I always just flip it over and
if you get
kind of eyeball it.
if you get pieces trying to stick to it, just even it back out and maybe flour it a little. You guys have seen do.
Yeah, I've done that before. Yeah. I always just add more flour to the rolling pin, and then if you tear it a little bit, you can kind of get a tiny bit of flour and pat it back down.
So while you were rolling crusts, Pat was inside making the filling for these 2 pies. What did we go with? We did an apple pear, which we don't have proof of here because
we ate it.
An entire party of people ate it before I could even see it.
He didn't get to try it.
And then this is
It's an apple walnut rum raisin pie.
Rum raisin. Whatever you're gonna fill it with. Let's talk about the prep of the filling today. We peeled the apples.
The basic apple pie, you want to have more than one kind of apple in there. I used to just make them all with Granny Smith, and that's good. Granny Smith is a real good apple for pies. It's got a lot of flavor in it, and it'll hold together. I'll hold it into those little slices and stay apple. But the blended apples, I think, makes a better flavor in there. You just get more appliness out of it. Let's call that a word.
Appliness. We use Honeycrisp and Granny Smith since Honeycrisp are available now.
And
they
delicious.
taste so good.
Yeah, they're super sweet up against Granny's kind of tartness.
Granny Smith is really tart.
So you peeled, sliced. I noticed you tossed them in orange juice. Is that just to keep them from aesthetically going brown?
Yeah, that's all it is. Sometimes I use concentrated orange juice, like without thinning it with any water. I just put that in there and just coat all the pieces real well. It doesn't seem to come across in the pie as a strong orange flavor. And lemon juice, some people use that. I think that does have a strong flavor and it can take over the pie, but orange juice is a little milder. And so I'm using that. It's still got the citric acid in there and it'll still keep the apples from getting all brown.
We took the raisins, we soaked them in Appleton rum, and they literally plumped up and smelt the house up something awesome.
Rum. Yes, they did.
And then we toasted the walnuts. Is there a reason particular for roasting them? Toasting them?
Yeah, they just taste better when they're a little bit crunchy.
I agree. A little bit of salt in there too.
Yeah, a little butter in your pan. You could throw them in a cast iron skillet and do this on top of your stove. Or you could stick them in the oven for a few minutes and get them all nice and crunchy in there. But I would just toss them in a little bit of butter first and a tiny bit of salt. You don't need even the salt at all, but I like a little bit of it on there. That gets them a little more crunchy and they hold together more as nuts that way. If you leave them untoasted, they tend to soak up a lot of juice from the apples or whatever else you're using in your pie. And
they get a little soggy.
They get kind of soggy.
Yep. So Elsa was rolling them out. There's a really cool trick where you kind of roll the pie crust up in it around the pin.
You roll it around the rolling pin and then use the rolling pin to lift it kind of into the pan. It keeps it from tearing, I think.
Then you kind of bowled it in and then you brought it in and you pre-bake.
Yeah, you pre-bake it for about 7 minutes. That way the bottom doesn't get all soggy. Because the apples have a lot of juice in them.
You can just put the crust in the bottom, fill it with your fruit, put the top crust on. A lot of people like to do it that way because it's easier to get the top and bottom crust to bond together that way. That is true. However, I like to do that because the bottom of my crust is still going to be crunchy.
Yep.
When I take it out of the pan. And I like it that way. I like crunchy crust.
So you pre-bake and then the filling time comes. On the apple one, I noticed you made a well-tiled layer of apples. You're not just throwing apples in and like, oh, it's full.
You kind of can't because you've already gotten it kind of softened up in the oven.
Actually, you started by putting your secret ninja sugar spice in there.
I put a little layer of sugar in the bottom, and that actually, if the pie crust is hot enough, will start baking into it, which is good. It gives it a kind of a sealed off layer. And then I kind of spiral them in the bottom of the pie pan just to give the first tiled in layer of apples, and then more sugar, and then more apples, and then more sugar, and then more apples, and a bunch of sugar on the top, whatever's left of that cup of sugar, and then put the top crust on. Good idea to take the top and bend it under the edge of the bottom one, creep it together like that.
Yeah, I noticed Elsa was doing a good job of making the two kind of lips meet together.
Yeah.
And that makes for a super thick kind of ridge too, which is just, if you're making good crust, it's amazing. Yeah. If you're making bad crust, that just makes a lot of bad crust that you don't want to eat at the end.
That people won't
This
eat.
is like, you actually save this piece in this pie.
For this one, you layered the raisins in the middle and then put the walnuts on the top, right?
I did, and I did that because I wanted to keep the walnuts up out of the juice as much as possible and keep them crunchy, and I wanted those raisins to permeate themselves in the whole pie from the middle to the top and the bottom and everything. And that's how I layered it in there for the flavors that I wanted to get.
It goes back out to Elsa on the porch. It gets its top crust. It's met. It's beautiful. And now you're going to bake it at 375 to 450. You said there's kind of a range for this first stage.
You can get all the way up to 450 degrees for like the first 15 minutes. What I like to do is pump it up just a little bit higher on your baking temperature for the first 20 minutes. Not quite to 400 degrees. Like 380, 390 is okay. And it's a good idea to put your pie in the oven as the temperature's rising, because that's really going to start to bake into the crust. And then, after about 15-20 minutes of that, put your temperature back down to 350 and go another 40 minutes.
One thing we should point out that we've learned the hard way at several residences is you want to line your stove, your oven, with some aluminum foil, either on a rack. If you're only making one pie, maybe make it on the second rack. Or in our case, we were doing a bunch of baking, so we straight up, Pat made a kind of like a little lipped bowl out of foil and put it on the bottom, because you are going to lose a little bit of juice out of the side of these mammoth, awesome pies. And
you don't want it to burn to the bottom
of your oven. When you assemble it this way, it's going to ooze.
Yeah.
And that's how you know when it's getting done.
Yeah, we put this one back in because it wasn't oozing. Even though the ding had come up, you're like, no, 5 more minutes. I want that
ooze. It's not bubbling around that edge yet, so it's not there.
So it oozed. Okay. We took them out, you let them cool, and then, you eat them how much ever long later, right? You just want them to be cool.
You don't want it to be real piping hot. If you do that, your juice is just going to really start running everywhere. And you want that to kind of set in there.
Right.
You can eat it warm if you don't want it really, really hot.
Yeah. And that is magnificent. Let's talk about this pie. How did it turn out, ladies?
I haven't tried it.
Yeah, let's try it.
Been talking.
Too much talking, not enough pie eating.
Like
cinnamon,
the raisins in there.
You can really taste the rum.
The rum is prevalent.
It tastes really good.
How did that come out?
Good, they're nice and crunchy still. They didn't get soggy.
As I was just listening to you talk for the first time, even though I've seen you both do this like a dozen times, it's interesting how beer-like it is. People will talk about when you're making a beer, your base malt, you kind of want to make it a little complex. Not crazy, but complex. This whole idea of the wheat flour and the white flour, it's that same kind of thing. It's like, don't let anything be boring from the base that you have to have all the way to the filling. And you're totally freestyling this filling the whole way. You're like, where's the rum? You got raisins? Let's toast those nuts. So it's like, there's recipes, but then there's owning your creation too. Yeah. Right? I mean, pie isn't necessarily a...
Yeah, I like experimenting with fruit pies, and I like blending different flavors together. Kind of something I got from my grandma Connolly. She used to make a thing that was gooseberry peach, because she had both of them in her yard. And man, that was good.
Yeah, who taught you to make pies? Your grandmother?
Both my grandmothers and my mom too. And I learned a little something from everybody.
And then you taught Elsa?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
Good.
How did it go?
It went well. She makes amazing pies. I guess I meant more like, did she want to? Did she come to you and say, teach me the pie? Or did you have to be like, kiddo, you have to learn this, because one day you're going to have to make the pie?
No. I might have said that at one point in time. But it's every time we get together we make pie. It's like our bonding ritual.
Yeah.
We always used to make them at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Around the holidays. Or for someone's birthday. There was always birthday pie.
Yeah, we didn't do cakes.
This family doesn't do cakes. I haven't had a birthday cake in 8 years.
Do you miss it?
Which I don't know, because I always get a really crazy pie. Since I've known you, we've had fruit pies. You make an amazing chocolate pie from scratch. We had a cake pie in which you guys hybridized. That's you're like, okay, we can have some cake, but it's going to be in pie form. That was amazing. These guys made it. Maybe we'll do that in the future, but. This is with the same crust. You could do savory pies, right?
Oh yeah, you can make a turkey pot pie. That's a really good way to use some of your turkey left over from Thanksgiving. You can make a stock out of that and keep some of the meat, put it in there.
What's the story behind that rolling pin?
Elsa kind of got that from my sister Ann, and my sister Ann got it from my mother, I believe. It's been around a long time, and it's never ever been soaking in water. You don't want to ever do that. After you get done with your rolling pin, you just wipe it off and roll it up in a dish towel like that one. Put it away. Kind
of like a cutting board. You don't ever want to touch it with soapy water. Right.
No.
And also, besides not having a birthday cake in 8 years because we eat pie, it's a huge family tradition to eat pie for breakfast with the boys.
It's good.
So this will be
good with coffee.
This will be tomorrow's breakfast, and that's awesome to marry into a family that excuses something like that.
Allows something like that.
Allows something like that. Promotes something like that.
Yeah, really.
Also, one thing to remember when you're rolling the crust out, if it tears, you can always patch it.
You can.
By taking a
just
piece
get a little bit wet with a little bit of your leftover water and push it together. It'll just push right back together.
Cool. I mean,
so if it tears, don't freak out because you can always kind of patch it back together.
Well, same thing when you're rolling it, but also like when you flipped it, it may tear or you may be a bit short. Just grab a little ball from the side.
You can grab a little extra piece and kind of patch it back together.
Yeah. There's so many places.
I've done it many times.
There's so many places where it could seem like it's going wrong and you've messed it up, but it's just pie and it's gonna turn out okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just watch your temperature right. Don't do it all hour at 400 degrees. Or
no, you'll burn the pie.
Yeah.
And we've also seen if the edges start getting a little too done, you can kind of make like a makeshift ring out of foil just to protect the crust, right?
They make a thing that'll do that. It's a ring just to set around the crust of your pie. That'll be after it's been baking for a little while, and you just kind of want to shield it from getting too much heat on it and burning around the edge. Because some pies really need to bake longer to get the filling done.
Well, chopandbrew.com/recipes. We're going to put this stuff on there. At least the crust and maybe the fillings. It's a little bit like some people brew. Sometimes it's not all on a sheet of paper. It's more in here. It's this. A little of that and a little of this. But we can at least guide you. We can guide you to the first part. So let us know. Hopefully this puts some people into pie mode. It's so much better than cake.
Much better than cake.
It's way better than cake.
And let us know if you try it. Until you make your own pie. This is Chip.
Elsa.
Pat.
Mommers. Signing off. Chop and brew. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew.
Milk for milk. Pie for pie.
Pie for pie.
Okay, and then when we're talking, you can either just talk to one of us, like either of us, or just kind of like this is...
Are you going to ask me questions? Or
yeah,
what do we lead off with?
Yeah, I will feed...
Okay.
I'll feed the beast.
Feed the beast.
I will feed the beast pie. You want some pie, Charlie? You want some pie? Pie 5. Pie 5. Pew, pew.
You just want 3 pieces cut out of it, right?
The whole thing into 3 pieces.
Yeah, just 3 pieces.
No, Chip. We're not doing that.
Oh! Chop for chop. Brew for brew. Thanks, ladies. High five! Pew. It's so much better than cake.
Much better than cake.
It's way better than cake.